2020. What a fucking disaster. But it wasn't all bad, kids. We may have gone, actually, we're still currently going through some of the scariest stuff in my 40 plus years on this planet, but honey, we did it with a killer soundtrack. Some say that the best art comes out of times of trouble. That makes sense since 2020 was a fantastic year for popular music, and the Great Pop Culture Debate is here to tell you all about it in our Best of 2020 Music Edition. I can't teach a man how to wear his pants, but I can help him take them off. I'm your host, Eric Rezsnyak, and I am joined by this week's panel, forever reaching for Zen-like status by practicing her ohms. Please welcome Andrea Guerrero.
Eric, now's really not a good time. My Pluto's in Gatorade, and I'm trying to align my chanclas.
Oh my God, my chanclas. I'm having a flashback to my childhood with my mom chasing me. He'd rather be dry, but at least he has his Chromatica jockstrap. Please welcome to the podcast, Jake Pitochelli.
Rain on me, tsunami, Eric. And yes, that is a euphemism.
Oh, hey. I'm sure. I've heard all the stories.
Oh, I bet you have.
His Spotify rap for 2020 called him a big old queer. It's Kevin Dillon.
Oh, Eric, I just want to get physical.
Our Best of 2020 episodes will be a little different than our usual format. There's no polls, no brackets, and honestly, barely even any debating. Our panelists are just going to do a pop culture show and tell of our favorite stuff from this past year. Do you disagree with our picks? Do you want to add some of your own to the discussion? Head to greatpopculturedebate.com and leave a comment on this episode, or find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook and tell us what you think. And with that out of the way, let's get to our top 5 picks of this year. I'm going to throw it first to Andrea. What is one of your, we call it the top 5, but frankly, spoiler, we had top 10 lists and some of our picks didn't quite make the cut. Listen to the warm up on our Patreon page for that. Andrea, talk about one of your 5 picks that we're going to be discussing today.
So I want to start off with 3:15:20 by Childish Gambino. We all love Childish Gambino. We know him very well. We love Donald Glover. This album, admittedly, it's not his best album, but for the vast majority of us, I don't think any of us were putting out our best work in 2020, right? It was, we kind of did what we could and we found joy where we could. And I really think that's what Childish Gambino did with this album, was he was just having a good time putting this album together. I've seen a lot of complaints that the lyrics were really simple and like faux intellectual, very much like, white guy read Hemingway for the first time in college and really wanted to talk about it.
So what happened?
I heard that criticism a lot, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for this album. Especially in March. So the album is called 3:15:20, which is when the album first streamed on his website for free. March and April were really crazy. And I wanted simplicity. That was all we craved, was just to kind of really get to bare bones. And so I didn't mind that the albums were rather simple for Gambino. I think the album is a fun grab bag of some of his past albums like Camp and Because the Internet and Awaken My Love. You get some of the kind of brash harshness from Camp, and you get some of the really sexy jazz from Awaken My Love, and there's even like some elements of Prince in there, and so it was just really what I needed to sort of relax and tune out, and it was really great to be able to put this album on and like dance around my kitchen and make a pizza. It's kind of forgettable in terms of Gambino albums, but I want to forget 2020, at least parts of it, not everything, but parts of it. And that's how I feel about this album.
I feel like that's very fair. And I will also say that I think it speaks to Donald Glover's, the expectations we have for him as an artist.
They're very high.
They're very high. And so if you're not constantly knocking it out of the park, then it's kind of thought as a disappointment. But maybe that's not what he was trying to do. And I always think that is something that fandoms have an issue with, is trying to respect the artist's intention versus their expectations of them. So
truly. And I really think that was his intention, was he wasn't trying to put out his best work. Like it's pretty clear that he wasn't putting the heart and soul into it like he was with Awaken My Love. And he was just wanting to be creative and have fun.
Nice. Anything else on that one?
I mean, that was pretty much the gist of it. It was really simple, and it was just what I needed at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, my pick, my one of my top fives is "Fun City" by Bright Light, which is not a hugely well known artist. I don't think. It is not an album that's going to change your life, but it's a really fun, very digestible, catchy album. Actually, most of my picks, spoiler, are fun, easily digestible, catchy. That's exactly what my musical wheelhouse tends to be. So what Bright Light gives you is really solid electro pop. It is, as you kind of pointed out, Andrea, great dancing in your apartment music. And incidentally, while speaking of dancing, during the pandemic, he has been doing some fabulous quarantine dance parties streaming, including my personal favorite, one devoted entirely to the music of the Pointer Sisters around September. Life giving. So even separate from his album, which is very solid, if you aren't following Bright Light on social media, strongly encourage you to do so. So there's not a bad song on this album. I'm going to give special shout outs though to Touchy, Used to Be Cool, and This Was My House. He's using, it's not just him. He's a producer and a DJ as well as a singer. He also is bringing in a bunch of iconic and up and coming gay singers like Brendan McLean, Jake Shears, and Andy Bell, who guest on this. In the past, he's also had Elton John on some of his songs. This is kind of what he does. I think it's a really strong album. And if you have not heard of him before, go back. His discography is great. And he does both covers and new stuff. And if you're gay and you're not listening to this album, I think you're being a homosexual wrong. So that is my pitch
Oh.
for Bright Light. And I think you need to get into it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake. What is one of your top 5 albums of the year?
Okay, so one of my top 5 albums of the year it disagrees with Kevin's choice for one of his disappointment album, but it's High Road by Kesha. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to debate this. I know we're trying to keep this positive, but I'm going to kind of put my argument out there as to why it's one of my top albums of the year. So it came out in late January. So at the beginning of the year, and I thought, at first I didn't include this as one of my top albums of the year because I kind of forgot about it. Not necessarily because it was a bad album, but because so much has happened and so much music had been released between its release and until now. But when I took a look back at some of the albums that I had been listening to over the year, I came back to this album and I really enjoyed it. So much fun, and it's kind of all over the place, right? It's a hot mess, but so is Kesha. And so I don't necessarily think that's a bad
Very
thing.
on brand. Very
Right?
on
It's
brand.
very on brand. Very. I think for many artists, if it were kind of all over the place, that could be a criticism. But I think for Kesha, it's kind of an exception where you have, pop, you have country, classic rock. And, this was the second album that she produced on her own after Rainbow. Her first, I think 2 or 3 albums were produced by, the executive producer that she had a big falling out with. And so this is kind of her, kind of getting her balls back for, for lack of a better term, or maybe not. And she, just for the fact alone, it's one of my top albums is for the lyric. It's in the song My Own Dance. It says, "Hey, I don't do that dance. I don't circumcise my circumstance." Right. And I think just for that lyric alone, for that lyric genius, I think is part of why, I really, it's just such a fun album. She doesn't really care as much. She's just having fun writing the album, she said, and you can tell when you listen to that. I think that is one of my top songs on the album, as well as the last song on the album, which is Chasing Thunder. It's just a really great feminist anthem, really empowering and kind of encapsulates where Kesha is now from where she started or where she was maybe a few years ago.
You know what's interesting, Jake? The way you were describing that is actually very similar to Andrea describing Childish Gambino, and I think the way that Taylor Swift also described Folklore, which someone on this podcast will be getting to in a minute,
Next.
is they were writing albums not to please anyone else. They were writing albums for themselves. And I appreciate that. Well, we went into this a little bit in the warm up, which again, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can go and listen to now. But there is something to be lauded for that, for not trying to make an album specifically to please your audience, but more, I'm an artist and this is what I want to say in this moment, which I think is fantastic.
What a perfect year to do something like that too.
Yep.
Amen. Like
Yep.
doing some self fucking care via art, right?
Yep.
So there you go. So thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. That was a very good argument for why it is not bad. Again,
Sorry.
check out
Well,
Kevin's argument in the warm up. Speaking of Kevin, I'm going to give it to you. What is one of your top 5 albums of this year?
Well, so it fell into spot number 8 for me because other folks are talking about other albums, but it is one that I want us to get to talk about, which is Taylor Swift's Folklore, which I came out last year as a Swiftie. I thought it was
Welcome to the club, Kevin.
Yeah, I don't think it's a thing that I didn't know about until like it just like came upon me. She was actually one of my top 5 artists this year. I really enjoy, and it was because I was listening to a lot of her different music this year, just because I do think there's something really great about the work that she does. And to your point as to her album Folklore, I think is an album that is pure escapism and nostalgia. And I think it really highlights why I enjoy her. It's that she writes her own stuff and she is a really, really, really good songwriter. And I don't think people give her, I don't think people give her enough credit on that. And I know she gets a lot of credit because she wins awards and things like that, but
she also gets a lot of criticism.
Yes. And I think it's such a well-written album. And I think some of it is word soup, which I love about her. And it's okay in that because it works. It actually actively works. And I think, spoiler alert, you'll notice this from my albums that I'm going to talk about. There's definitely some pop stuff that I love, but I'm definitely more of a like folky, soft, like this is fully my lane. And that's why her album makes this list for me. But I also just think it's just a damn good album. I really do. I think Cardigan is a great song. I love her collaboration with Bon Iver. I think it's so beautiful. Oh my God. I was at Boston Calling. This is a tangent for a second. When Bon Iver played, and there was, oh my God, he just started playing and the rain just started pouring. And it was like the most beautiful moment. But the two of their voices and Exile really complement each other. And I know some people actually criticize that song a little bit, but I really like it. I think it's really good. And I think this album highlights a more introspective Taylor, which I really appreciate. I would say it falls probably in her list of albums. I would say it probably falls number 3 for me in all of her albums of all time.
Interesting.
And what I like about it is she just feels more relaxed, more loose.
Yes.
There's just like she let go a little bit. And I think if you watched Miss Americana, which I think is I actually think is a really great music documentary.
Great documentary.
With Lover, she kind of unleashed all these great singles on us. I really like Lover from an individual track basis. I don't think it's a good album. I don't think it comes together. But that's why I love Folklore, because I think it is, and that you'll notice this with my albums. For me, there were some people I wanted to put on the list that I didn't, because I think there are there's an unevenness in some of the way they cohesively work together. I don't think they're bad albums. I just think that Folklore works because it really is seamlessly a good album.
Yeah, and in the warm-up, I talked a little bit, one of Andrea's other picks that we're not going to discuss at length is Trixie Mattel's album, Barbara, and I mentioned that Trixie Mattel has a great documentary called Moving Parts that you can find on streaming now, which really gives you insight into her as an artist. Yeah. Not so much the music part, but just her as a general artist. Miss Americana for Taylor fans is essential.
It's so good.
It really gives you an insight as to what she's trying to accomplish, this intense people pleasing part of her that has really driven so much of her music
Yep.
prior to Folklore.
Mhm.
And I think when it came out before Folklore, so then when you listen to Folklore, you can see she let off the gas and she's just doing what she wants to do. She's not worried about pleasing people. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Folklore is her most critically acclaimed album in years,
Yep.
far beyond the past two.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say this. I don't want her to win a third album of the year award. I think that's a bit extreme. Now, do I think she shouldn't have one of those? Correct. I do not. But I just think I just think it's a little bit too soon. I would be fine with her eventually doing it, but I guess this would be a good album to win. Like, I think winning for 1989 and this would have been like perfect. Like, that
Sure.
would have been a great combo. But I we'll talk about the person who I think someone will talk about the person I think who should win this year.
Was
Fair enough.
Folklore the album that was released when she was fighting with her record company?
No.
No.
That was there's a couple different fights that were going on with Taylor in the past couple of years. Her early records were all bought by Scooter Braun, who hates her guts. He
Yep.
bought the record label that was her first record label, and so he owns all the originals to her first, I think, 3 or 4 albums up through Red, I believe.
Yep.
And what is now happening, literally right now, as we're recording this in early December, is Taylor is actively re-recording because she still owns the rights to the actual like music, just not the recordings. She's re-recording all of her original albums right now, and in
Yep.
fact, one of the songs, "Love Song" from Fearless, I believe, or it's either Fearless or Speak Now, is used in a Deadpool commercial. But it's
For
her
Match.com.
Thank you. For her re-recording of that song is being used, and people have pointed out that there is an abandoned scooter in the background of the video. So one of the things I actually really love about Taylor is she stands up for artists' rights and
Yep.
is a great self-advocate. But I don't think that this album was recorded after her fights with her record label. She's now got her own thing going on. Was that what you were referring to, Andrea?
Yeah, I was just curious because it does seem like an album that would be released after a lot of struggles with the record company. I haven't listened to the album personally, but just from the general vibe and the kind of like indie feel to it,
Yeah.
that was what I was getting, was that this was, Taylor's way of doing something completely different than what a record company would look for.
Her record label did not know that she was releasing this. I will say that. This was a thing she
It was a
did
surprise
on,
release.
It was a surprise release, and bravo to her, honestly. I have to say that. It's a great album.
Jake, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say that what kind of going off of what Kevin was saying, that it is so cohesive that every song on the album you can listen to it and hear that, oh, this is a Folklore song. And what I love about her in the past few years is her political activism. As you mentioned in the Miss Americana documentary, she's such a people pleaser, and she was kind of afraid to let to make aware her political beliefs, which are clearly now she's more liberal and progressive, and it's something that's nice about these past few years and these past few albums. She's between "You Need to Calm Down" with "Lover," which is a gay anthem. Other people have there are some criticisms with it, but clearly with a lot of gay icons and showing her allyship, to this album as well with her political. I think there are political themes to this. I mean, I think if you look at the song "Cardigan," it's kind of kissing the haters goodbye, who are kind of giving her critiques with this, like the lyric, red lipstick, sensual politics. I think that kind of encapsulates, she doesn't really give a fuck what, critique she might be getting about her political stances that she's taking. It's because people are afraid of her, because Taylor Swift is such a force.
Absolutely, she is. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, she gets a lot of criticism. She got criticism for "You Need to Calm Down." Taylor cannot do anything without being hyper criticized. And I will say this a lot in the podcast. There is such an element of misogyny to this, including coming from other women, that I think people need to check. And every time someone's like, "Ugh, Taylor Swift," we're like, stop yourself and tell me why you don't like Taylor Swift. I need actual reasons. And I don't know. I just think she's annoying. where is that coming from?
I think some of her criticism was, and I do get this because I've seen it more and more, is from her apoliticalness. But obviously, Miss America explains that away, and it fully contextualizes that. And I think that's why a lot of artists, like I've heard it from, oh God, what's his name? Sorry, indistinguishable white twink. Not Shawn Mendes.
Troye Sivan?
No, Charlie Puth. Charlie Puth. Where it's been spotted that he's been on like liking MAGA stuff and things like that, and he has a huge fan base, and he said nothing during the election. So like I think that's what people were criticizing. I do think obviously there's misogyny in the Taylor thing more than that, but I think some people were just like, come on, speak up. But you could say the same thing about, I don't know, any pop
Correct. And that's the thing. It was just her.
Yeah.
So I want to move. Thank you, everybody, for a spirited discussion on Taylor Swift. So, Andrea, why don't you tell us about your second album that you want to discuss?
So my second album would be RTJ4 by Run the Jewels. I think everyone in the US is probably very familiar with Run the Jewels at this point in some capacity. Run the Jewels has just been like having a moment for the past like 5 years. Every album that they come out with has been a hit. There's never a miss. And I know that there was some disappointment around RTJ4, but I don't feel that way at all. I think the album reflects perfectly on what was going on in 2020 with Black Lives Matter movement, police brutality, other racial injustice issues. This album talks about all of that, which that's what Run the Jewels does, is they really do talk about a lot of those social injustice issues. They have their whole career. Killer Mike and LP have been very vocal about their thoughts. And this album was really the album for the movement of 2020, which I think is really what we needed. There was one track in particular that I wanted to call out called Walking in the Snow. And I want to read just like a verse from it. I'm not going to like try to rap it. Like no one wants to hear that. But the verse is, and every day on evening news, they feed your fear for free. And you're so numb, you watch the cops choke out a man like me until my voice goes from a shriek to a whisper, I can't breathe. And you sit there in the house on couch and watch it on TV. The most you give is a Twitter rant and call it a tragedy, but truly the travesty, you've been robbed of your empathy. And I think that there's so much in that one verse. But what was particularly jarring for me was the throw to I Can't Breathe, which I think a lot of us know was in reference to Eric Garner, which is who he was writing it about. But we found out later, after the murder of George Floyd, that his final words were also, I can't breathe. So it was just a reflection that these aren't just the problems of 2020. These aren't new problems, which those of us that are part of marginalized communities, we know that those aren't problems. But I think 2020, we all know, has kind of blown the lid off of every issue that this country has, which is a lot. But to hear that and think about, you know, how many times we've heard that phrase in the last few years, just really, it hurts and it sucks. And I just, whenever I hear Killer Mike talk about it, you can just like hear the pain in his voice. And I also really loved the last two lines about, you know, a Twitter rant and how it's sort of fleeting. And, you know, you sort of have this moment of anger for a week or two, and then you change your Instagram profiles and your Facebook profiles to the black square, and you know, that lasts for a day, and then you move on. And there's a lot of focus too, with 2020 being the longest shortest year ever. And you can feel that happening with some of these issues that are coming up. You know, you care a lot in the moment, and then it either moves so fast that you don't have time to care anymore, or you kind of get jaded. You really get desensitized to what's going on. Like you said, you've been robbed of your empathy.
Yeah,
Um,
that line in particular really resonates with me because I do think if you actually look at everything that's going on, the core of it is a total lack of empathy from parties. And I'll admit there are times where I'm like, why would you even think that? Like, these are people
Right.
too. Like, I just got the text that Rudy Giuliani tested positive for COVID, and my initial response was, "Oh, here it comes." And then I was like, "That's a man who's dealing with a very serious illness, and maybe you need to check yourself." So,
Oh, I still said yay.
yeah, I said yay.
Sorry.
but I do think that that speaks very much to exactly what's going on right now, and it sounds like an incredibly relevant album for this year.
Yeah.
So,
It's a really good album. I had a friend who was into them, very into them, and it got me to like go back into their catalog. And I was actually really hoping this album would be up for album of the year. I should have known better from the Grammys. But I think it is really it is a very strong album. It was very close to making my list. I didn't bring it up in the earlier warm up, but it's definitely in my top 20 of the year. I really like it. I think the lyrics that you hear, that I've grown to really become very fond of them. And I think what they do is really something special. And I think this album really put them on the map. And like, they didn't even get a best rap album nomination. Like it's really weird. Like, I think it's a really, really good album. I'm glad we're talking about it.
I'm glad we're talking about it too. Thank you both. Anything else to add on that, Andrea?
I just really appreciate how Run the Jewels have always been talking about this, and kind of they have to, given their circumstances. They have this platform, and they have the ability to reach an audience, kind of like how we were talking about Swift earlier, that she gets a lot of flack for being apolitical. And then when Run the Jewels is very overtly political, I think people can tune out really quickly.
Yes.
Yep.
But Killer Mike and LP, they were writing this album in 2019. So they were writing this album before, we even knew the hellhole that we were getting into for 2020. And just to have it be so relevant, a year after they wrote it, I think it just speaks volumes to the work that they've been doing.
Well, thank you again for bringing that to our attention. It's definitely one that I had not listened to yet, but I will make sure that I check out after this. I am going to do something utterly inconsequential compared to that and talk about Carly Rae Jepsen, which is arguably the least essential artist on this list.
A beautiful transition. Love
exactly. But God bless it, I love her. I think that Carly Rae is really giving us some of the best pop, just straight up pop, no like pop dash anything, of the past 5 or so years.
I agree.
I think that, so I'm talking specifically about Dedicated Side B. Dedicated Side A, I guess, not actually titled that, just Dedicated, came out last year. And weirdly, following the previous discs, which are Emotion and Emotion Side B, the Side B is once again so much better than the original album. And the original albums are not bad. They're not bad. Like they're fine. They're solid pop albums. But the side Bs are where it is at, and I don't know why she does that. But here we are. I would say that I think a lot of people missed this one because it was right in the middle of the pandemic and we were all kind of losing our shit. Like, for anyone who's listening to this in the future and you didn't really live through 2020, it has been like time has lost all meaning. This year has lasted a decade, and yet somehow also it's been just 2 weeks of terror, right? Like constant terror. And it's so easy to miss things. This one, I think, kind of fell through the cracks for people, but This Love Isn't Crazy, This Is What They Say, Fake Mona Lisa, Comeback, Solo. These are excellent pop songs. Any one of them should and could be on the radio as a hit single. Any one of them. They're great. And if you didn't somehow missed Dedicated Side B and you are a fan of just straight up pop, I want to strongly recommend this disc. Is it, again, an essential disc? No. Is it a very good pop disc? You betcha. So that's what I have to say about that. Jake, why don't you take us to your second pick?
All right. My second pick, I think, kind of goes off of what Andrea is talking about. An artist who is very relevant to the times that we're going through now, but also is going through a little bit of controversy. So this is After Hours by The Weeknd, one of the biggest albums of the entire year, just in a commercial success, but also on a single success. Blinding Lights, I believe, is the number one song of the entire year in terms of airplay. Every time I turn the radio, I hear Blinding, like, dun, 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 dun. And it's a good song, so I don't mind. I've been hearing it all year, but
It's the
it's a
TikTok
really good.
song,
It's
right?
catchy, right?
It's
Uh,
the TikTok song, right?
I believe so. I'm not sure, but I think so. And what I like this album is it has a lot of '80s synths, kind of incorporated with traditional R&B vibes, and standout songs from "Blinding Lights" to "Save Your Tears," which he did an amazing performance recently with Kenny Loggins at the VMAs.
Kenny
I don't.
Loggins.
I don't know. Did you see that performance, Eric?
It's so good.
I didn't. I'm old, and so I don't watch the VMAs, but I love Loggins. Go on.
Uh, well, he actually, no, it was at the American Music Awards, but he
Okay.
did perform at the VMAs on top of the Freedom Tower in New York, which gave me extreme vertigo,
Mm.
which is fun. And then he at the AMAs, he like walked across a bridge with Kenny Loggins, having like the saxophone moment with fireworks going off in the background, and of course, he was dressed up in like these bandages, which is a thing he's been doing
Yes,
throughout.
I did see that.
Yeah, if you notice, because it's kind of, and I kind of looked into why, the messaging behind this, but it kind of goes along with the album cover where he's bleeding, and it's kind of a microcosm and a representation of the brutality that Black men and women are going through right now. And in all of his acceptance speeches, where he won Artist of the Year at the VMAs and Artist of the Year at the AMAs, he several times he would just go up and say nothing. His only speech would say "Justice for Breonna Taylor," and then
Mm.
walk off.
Mm.
So he's really bringing that star power, and using his platform to bring attention to that. Simultaneously, he's not nominated for any Grammys.
Don't get me
And
started. It's so bad. Keep
I
going.
know, and this is the controversy I was talking. He has this, which is interesting because Grammys typically love, chart-topping songs. I think of Bruno Mars, who swept up, and Billie Eilish and Adele, who swept up a lot of top category wins and had because they had big commercial success. But I think I can't really seem to find a reason, or nor can anybody, why he was kind of blocked out of the awards. And he took to Instagram, I don't know if you guys have seen, to say, the Grammys owe my fans and everybody some transparency, which I kind of agree with.
Well, the T is, or the sorry for our straight listeners, the rumor
Spill
is
it.
is that he was approached by Jay-Z to perform at the Super Bowl, and he
Right.
accepted that. And the Grammy said, "Well, we want you to perform too, but you can't perform at both. So you have to pick." And he had been approached and agreed to the Super Bowl before. And it's
Mhm.
Jay-Z. Are you going to say no to Jay-Z? I'm
And
not.
it's the
Jay-Z,
Super Bowl.
and it's the Super
Like,
Bowl.
Yeah.
So he was like, okay, well then I guess if you are, I mean, I don't understand why the Grammys wouldn't be like, I mean, how many times does The Weeknd perform? And we keep talking about his performances. People are still going, I love this album and I'm glad it's on your list. I think it's very good. I'm spotty on The Weeknd, but I love this album. I think Blinding Lights would probably be my single of the year personally, because I do think it's so fun. It's just so 80s. It's so perfect. It's so, so, so good. And the fact that he got 0 Grammy nominations is why the Grammys are corrupt. And I think they're a mess. Like,
you would
it's
think
insane. Insane.
after what happened last year with the Grammys, when there was like
Insane.
everything blew up last year with the Grammys and like the legit scandals, like it wasn't even suggested, it was flat out said, all of
Yep.
the
Mhm.
corruption that was going on. You would think they would have been on their best behavior this year and being like, okay, like seriously, guys, let's just do this. Like, just do it the way it needs to be done. And they still fuck around. Like,
No, no, ma'am.
crazy to me.
No,
Crazy.
ma'am.
Crazy. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Anything else, Jake, or are you cool with us moving along?
No, that's good. I just want to say I think it's just disappointing that he didn't get any, nominations for it. But he'll have the last laugh. I mean, it's the top album of the year
Yep.
commercially, performance wise. It was a great successor to Starboy, and I think the reason there is so much protest that this didn't get a nomination for anything is kind of a reflection of why it was such a good album.
Agree. All right, Kevin, what about your number 2 pick? Or I should say your second pick.
What? Let's. Oh yes. Oh, Haim. Women in Music Part 3. I have enjoyed them. I think they are fine artists, but this album, my lord, I was late to this album, and I asked a group of friends who we have a group text with who are very big in music, and I was like, okay, what do I need to listen to? And the album that all three of them said was Haim. And so I was like, okay, I've listened to their stuff before. And my lord, I've listened to that album at least 6 times since. I think it's really fantastic, and it really elevates their artistry to a whole new level. It's three sister. If you aren't familiar with them, it's three sisters. It's this like folky. You'll hear that in a lot of my stuff, I guess. Folky album that is just really, really fantastic, and each of them have been going through their own personal tragedy that they brought to this level. One of them was diagnosed with diabetes. One of them had a partner who was diagnosed with cancer.
Gosh.
And they're bringing their own pain to the album, but they're also bringing a level of fun that I genuinely love and enjoy. There's a song called 3 a.m., which I fully connect with. And it's about someone like being like, hey, what's up? Just calling to see if you're still up. I can't tell you how many times I've done that.
I was going to say, that is the Kevin Dillon theme song, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't know him, the sup, you awake,
listen,
that is Kevin's
know,
aesthetic.
I'm fine with it. I am going to slide in your DMs and I'll own it. You know what? Just
Exactly.
embrace it. It means I find you attractive, regardless.
Lean into stereotypes.
I'm fine with it. And it does go straight to voicemail in the song, and it sometimes goes straight to voicemail in those DMs. But I think what I love about this album is it really shows the true evolution of artistry that you would expect from a group of folks who really have the talent, and they really bring it in this album. I think this is something that I would highly recommend anyone who like just genuinely loves music to listen to. They're really good lyricists. It's not all a downer, which is great. I think that's one of the big things that I can share about it. It's got this like somewhat poppy feel to it in many ways. It's multi-genre. There's some rock in there. There are really overstuffed arrangements that I love an overstuffed arrangement. Who doesn't? Where you get to see all of these different quirks and fun aspects to the work that they're doing in their music. I think this would be actually my runner up for the albums that are nominated for Album of the Year. I think it's a really, really strong album. And I would highly recommend folks listen to this. It's a really beautiful album.
Awesome. We are going to take the quickest of breaks, and we will be right back with the rest of our top 5s of the year. Welcome back. We are in the middle of discussing our best albums of 2020. I'm going to hand it to Andrea. What is your third pick?
Next up, I want to talk about Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple, which I always want to talk about Fiona Apple in general, but for the purpose of this podcast, we'll narrow it to Fetch the Bolt Cutters. I don't really know what more there is to say other than it's Fiona Apple. Like that should just be enough to warrant someone's top 5 albums, in my opinion. She can do no wrong. She is what I consider to be like the Janis Joplin of our generation, just with the passion and the soul in her voice that she's had in her entire career. And Fetch the Bolt Cutters is no different. She recorded this album out of her house in California, and I think it's one of the most well-produced albums that she's ever released. It just sounds like sonically fantastic. If you appreciate production value, the fact that she did it out of her house and it was mostly her, it's amazing. It's percussive, it's emotional. She's utilizing everything in her house as an instrument. She's banging on the ground. She's like literally like tearing pieces of paper into a microphone to get that sound. She's like singing to her dog's ashes like on a mantle. Like it's just it's everything that I think a lot of us had pent up in 2020, even especially as the year went on. I think any of us would have, jumped on the opportunity to scream into a microphone and bang on trash cans and make an album. Like that just sounds so cathartic. And you can feel that in this album. And I like that she did a lot of, I don't really want to say different, but it's definitely strayed from her normal. I think a lot of people think of her as like a piano musician, especially with Criminal. I mean, which is a song that I feel like everyone knows. You don't really get that like sort of like poppy piano vibe in this. There's a track, Newspaper, where she has like a bass guitar, and it's like a slap bass technique. So it almost sounds a little it sounds heavy, and you don't hear that a lot with her. But I really do believe that Fiona is like an underrated feminist icon. And I think
totally.
she deserves a lot more space when it comes to talking about intersectional feminism. And you can pick up on a lot of that in this album. She's talking a lot about, bad breakups, but she's also talking about some abusive relationships that she's been in, especially emotionally manipulative relationships. And the way that she's carrying that on her soul, on her chest, and the way that she lets it out, it really kind of it makes you weep almost at some parts. You just kind of like, clutch your chest and you're like, oh my God, Fiona, I love you so much. Please never stop making music. But yeah. I know this album ranked number one album for a couple of different websites. I think like Consequence of Sound. I think Pitchfork maybe even had it as their number one album. But yeah, I mean, what more can you say? It's Fiona Apple. She put out an amazing album. Like that's it.
That's it.
That's the tweet.
And Shamika, we cannot forget Shamika.
Yeah, Shamika said she had potential, and she sure did.
It is definitely a very different sound for her, and I had Tidal back when I was a wee teen. But she's certainly, to me, I don't even think she's underrated. I think she is 100% a feminist icon, and I think her career has been fascinating to watch. She's a true artist to me in every sense of the word. I don't think you can even debate that. So thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts on Fiona? Or
I think this album's just amazing. It is incredible. It was also on my list, so I'm glad you. Yep.
Correct. I will go with my third, which is Manic by Halsey. And I will say that prior to this album, I knew of Halsey. I was familiar with some of her songs. I was not particularly connecting with the music, but I think that's fine because I don't consider myself Halsey's target audience. But this album blew me away. In some ways, I can actually see parallels for this and some of what Fiona did, decades ago. It's for me on a completely different level from anything I've ever heard from Halsey before. There's a real maturity here, both in the songwriting and in her performance. It felt very much like she's exposing parts of herself that I don't think she had done prior there's a lot of self-introspection here, but it wasn't navel-gazing to me as much as it was an acknowledgement and a trying to find ways of moving forward. It was, I mean, you used the word cathartic with Fiona Apple, Andrea, and this album feels very cathartic to me. Beyond that, what I really liked about this album is the levels to it. It's not just one mood, it's not just one tempo, it's not just one mode. This is a real roller coaster, but it's all very cohesive to me. I thought it was, to me, in terms of an overall album, this to me is a work. And I was so impressed by it. There's a couple interludes featuring other artists that have clearly inspired her. One of them is by Alanis Morissette, and like you can see Alanis Morissette's influences on this artist, and the whole thing just felt rich and fully lived to me, and I was so impressed by this. And Halsey has very much a new fan in me, so thank you to Halsey. She also got shut out, I believe, from the Grammys, and she made I thought it was a very thoughtful but not, I'm going to use the term butthurt here, that's not really a fair, because I think that, she has every reason. To me, it was just like, you put a work out there, you think you've done an amazing job, people do resonate with it, it gets
Mhm.
completely ignored by your industry peers, but I can just do what I did, and I'm have to be happy with that. And I think that she should be very, very happy with this album. I was blown away. So that is my number 3. Jake, how about yours?
Well, I just want to add to that, Eric. I also loved Manic by Halsey, and I myself wasn't a huge Halsey fan before. I knew of her, of course, with her the song I think like Closer with who's that group, like, baby pull me closer in the backseat of with the chain smokers.
Chain smokers.
Yes, I knew her from that originally, and then she did a collaboration with BTS recently, which I really like. So she's done lots of cool collaborations.
Mhm.
But this album, Manic, I really enjoyed. I thought it was smart, well written, and it's one of the albums that I played most, and I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
I on a daily I listened to, like, You Should Be Sad or Graveyard, and not until recently did I learn that her name was Ashley, and if you
Yes.
interchange the letters, that's actually that spells Halsey.
Yep.
So that also, that was also, we love to see that. My third album choice of the year goes to Sam Smith. I think they are so talented. They're one of the few artists that has a Grammy, Oscar, Golden Globe, and they're, like, I think only younger than 32. They're beyond talented, and the transition from the first album, where he did Stay With Me, where they did Stay With Me, and to now, to Love Goes, I think really shows their transition to this pop, diva, fun music that they kind of always wanted to, and that's something that I heard them say in a recent interview, that they've always wanted to, that they always listen to, Beyonce on the daily in their caftan, and that's kind of the music that they wanted to release, something that they could just do that, because they were going to release this album earlier in the year, and then they pushed it back in the middle of the pandemic, because they wanted to make it more fun and upbeat. And I think they accomplished that between Dancing with a Stranger with Normani, How Do You Sleep. Those are really upbeat songs that I listen to all the time, that I think, are really not only just a fun listen to, but they're smartly written and really cool. Something different than what they've been doing. It's a complete opposite from Stay With Me, and I really like to see the side of Sam, and I hope that he does it more. I saw their live stream of the concert recently, of their debut, of Love Goes, on iTunes, and it was amazing. The choreography, and the instrumentals that they do, I just think every time that they perform, it's next level. And this album it's a lot of fun, and that was their intention, writing it, and I think that it was accomplished.
That's excellent. And I will say that much, I think Taylor gets a lot of criticism that's undeserved. I think Sam Smith also gets a lot of criticism that's
For
undeserved.
sure.
I see people coming for Sam Smith all the goddamn time.
I guess I'm
And
going to be quiet during this segment.
that's
'Cause
fine. That's fine.
I think
That
they deserve it, but it's fine.
it's fine. Well, thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. Kevin, what about you? What's your third pick?
My third pick is Perfume Genius, which is my level of queer excellence. And their album Set My Heart on Fire Immediately. I didn't know about them until I watched the movie Booksmart. And if you've seen the movie, their song is used when oh my god, what is her name? I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. I'm blanking. But when she jumps into the pool and she's swimming through the pool, and it's called Slip Away, and I was like, oh my god, I'm obsessed with this song. I love this song. Um and then I started listening to like every single thing that they did, and I love this album. I think it is so beautiful. I think it navigates this experience, what they are going for, and I've read interviews with them. It's an exploration of body and like what their experience around body means. So the artist, his name is, this is really bad of me because I love the album, and I'm blanking. It's Mike Hadreas. He was exploring dance, and it was his exploration of body and dance through this album. So there's definitely some like slower pieces that you get, but there's also these like very poppy musical moments in the album, and so you get this like really good blend of, I think, powerful ballads, but also powerful pop moments. And what I love about them is that they really just, the whole album is an event. And I think, as any queer person should do, even Sam Smith does this, you create an event. And I think that's the thing I love about Perfume Genius and any queer artist. Like, you get this experience through this album that you're just like, I am taken on a journey and I want to go there. I think the other thing, this is their fifth album. And it's really just, it glides into this like almost like sublime experience where you're just like feeling all these different emotions, whether you're feeling a little bit wrong or you're feeling a little bit of dissonance, or there's this joy that you feel around what they're portraying. And I think the way they explore the human body in the lyrics that they have, it's really like beautiful. And you get this like, I don't know, the way it's like this like passion or desire that you get to explore through their music. And I really love them. So if you've never listened to our Perfume Genius song, I guess I would share with you to start with Slip Away, because I think it's very much a song that's a good entry point into them, and then kind of jump into their different albums, especially this one, because I think it is one of their best, and I highly recommend it. And I actually don't think enough people are talking about this as one of the best albums of the year. It's one that I think is kind of getting discounted, unfortunately. And I do think it has to do with their queer identity.
And that's why we're here, Kevin, is to
I know.
hopefully give some attention to some other albums that people should be considering. So
Yes,
if it was the same albums that everybody else is talking about, it'd be kind of pointless. But
That's
I'm glad
right.
that you're bringing that to our attention. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Andrea, how about you? Your fourth album?
So my fourth album is going to be Ohms by Deftones. I think a lot of people abandoned the Deftones in 2002, after they released White Pony, which was their sort of breakthrough album that everyone loved. And I was one of them. Whenever they released an album, I listened to it, I gave it a chance, and it just always sort of fell flat for me. They spent a lot of time in the last decade experimenting with their sound. They didn't really like change up their genre. They just really tried to play with the texturing of some of the guitar work that the guitarist Stephen Carpenter was doing. And which is great. I mean, we've, kind of hit on this a little bit today. We always want to see artists grow and challenge themselves and change. But I think there was a little bit of a struggle within the band to really find that balance that they needed. So Ohms came out, and it's the first album in the past decade from this band that I have listened to more than once. I mean, I've listened to it tons of times, but I mean, to to be able to come back to them and see them grow from White Pony while still being able to maintain this heavier rock and metal sound was just really comforting for me. And I didn't expect this album. I didn't even know they were coming out with an album. They became one of those bands that I sort of stopped paying attention to. It was like, oh, they released an album. Okay, I'll listen to it and then move on with my life. And so this one really grabbed me. And I think the title track, Ohms, is super accessible. And I think even three gay men who really love pop music would really love this track. So I highly recommend you guys go check it out. It's just really it's a good rock album, which you don't really get a lot of these days if you're not tuned into the rock genre scene.
Yeah, that's very true. That's one of the things that I realized in the past like 5+ years. Like rock is dead. Like
yeah, it is.
Rock does not exist anymore.
It's like country.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would love to get. We'll get to this in a second, but like I need some much like banging. I need that pulse. I need something that's moving me forward. That was
enough about your personal life.
Exactly. We don't. But in all seriousness, like I miss rock. And so I am 100% going to check out that album on your recommendation, Andrea. Thank you.
Awesome.
I will go with my second, fourth, whatever pick, which is Disco by Kylie Minogue. And much like Miss Carly Rae Jepsen, whom we discussed previously, Kylie has this tendency of like every other album is really good. And then the ones in between are fine. They're fine, not bad. But they're the even numbered albums, as I think of it, are fire. Disco is fire. So her album before this was more country influenced. And again, there are some lovely songs on that. But Disco is exactly what you think it is. It is a disco album. However, it is not a throwback. It does not sound corny. It does not sound like 70s music. It takes what made disco work from the 70s and brings it into a modern context. And for me, it's very successful. I'm not going to say that every album or every song on the album is terrific because there are a couple clunkers in there, but there are some great singles on this album. Miss a Thing, Real Groove, Monday Blues, Where Does the DJ Go?
Where does the DJ go? Oh,
fabulous,
God.
Right? It's probably her most danceable album since Fever, and that is very high praise coming from me because Fever was it in the early 2000s. Of course, I am remiss not mentioning Magic, which is not the opening single. It is the like second single, I believe, and it is fantastic. It is, we've talked about caftan bops, right? This is a caftan bop, ladies and gentlemen. It is like every time, I think it is in my top 5 like most listened to songs of the year, and it came out in November. So that should tell
Eric.
you. I can't.
Oh, it's aggressive.
I can't. Aggressive, but needed. It is a great, I'm cooking Blue Apron.
Very fair.
Very much that.
I can't judge you. I can't judge you because my most listened to song last year was Shallow, and that came out in like October, and like I listened to it like 100 million times.
It's whatever gets us through this year, right?
Exactly.
So I think it's a really fun, great album from Kylie, and I'm all about disco. And I would say this, Kylie may be the last 80s pop diva still standing, which I would not have guessed 30 years ago. She's been around since the 80s, kids. And at this point, she has fully walked off with Madge's gaze. And that's because Kylie is giving us what we want. She's giving us everything we want. And
she is the Highlander.
She is. Thank you, Kylie. We salute you. That is my spiel. So Jake, take it away. What is your fourth album?
All right, Eric. So you mentioned that you were needing some rock and roll in your life. And
Mhm.
while this next album isn't necessarily in the specific genre of rock and roll, it definitely has those influences. And this album is Plastic Hearts by Miley Cyrus. I put this on my top album list even before it was even released, just because based on the first single, Midnight Sky, and the direction I saw that she was taking with this album, I just knew that I was going to love it. And then once I learned the collaborations that were going to be on this album, even more so. Some of the collaborators that she has in this album are very current and such as Dua Lipa with her
Mhm.
single "Prisoner," which is such a bop.
Such a bop.
The music video is crazy. There's blood. There's disco. There's flashing lights. I feel like Stefan from like SNL.
It has everything.
It's
It
got
has
everything.
everything. New York's hottest club is. um, but also, what I love about this album is, again, it has those rock and roll vibes and the throwback to the 80s. And I think that makes sense because she is a child of the 80s. Not necessarily was she born then, but her father, obviously, as we know, Billy Ray Cyrus, such an 80s icon, and now kind of having a rebirth renaissance moment with Old Town Road last year. But she has really, gotten legends like Joan Jett on her song Bad Karma. The Edge of Midnight / Midnight Sky remix with Stevie Nicks was the
Oh,
remix I
so
never knew I
hot.
needed.
So hot.
So
Love it.
good. Oh my God. It is just like perfection when I listen to it. And it gives me life, and it just makes this gay boy very happy to hear those two queens from Stevie Nicks and Miley Cyrus. Just that remix is everything, and I can't listen to it enough. I think that was, I'm not sure if it's my number one listened to song this year because I don't have Spotify. um
What?
It's like
I'm an Apple Music.
blasphemy in 2020.
I'm an Apple Music user. And hold on, let me tell you why. Because I don't know if I should say this on the pod. Well, whatever.
Say it.
Because I still use my my college edu email, so I still get the discount. So it's
Love it.
she loves a bargain.
She does. She
Please
does. We
welcome to
love
the
it.
main stage, Bargain Basement.
Exactly. We love a frugal queen.
No, exactly. So, I may not be able to show how everybody, how cool I am and that I listen to music once a year. But, I love a good bargain, and I'm only going to pay $4.99 for it. So until they find out, until they listen to this podcast, until Apple listens to this podcast and sends me a threatening letter,
The
I'm going to
jig
keep
is
doing
up, Jake Pitochelli.
it.
You're done for.
I've been caught. Okay, let's back to Miley. The other song which I love with an 80s icon is Billy Idol, Night Crawling. It is such an have you listened to it, Eric?
I have. Like, honestly, Jake, this entire album is so good. And I'm so glad that it's right up in your top 2 because I would have picked it for my top 5 if you hadn't had it on yours. It is excellent. And like I will say, I'm out of my least target demographic. I was way older than Hannah Montana. I always thought that Bangers was her trying really, really hard, and she was very successful in that phase. But this to me felt very authentic. I believe that this is the music that Miley Cyrus is into, and she is fully present here.
100%, and I love kind of this glam rock inspiration. And obviously, she produces with Mark Ronson, who that's very in his wheelhouse. And this is kind of her gateway, kind of touching her foot into the realm of rock and roll. And I love how much of a chameleon she is, where she can go from this classic, this rock and roll genre to pop, but again, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. I mean, going from an average girl by day and a superstar by night as Hannah Montana, she's been doing that for all her life.
It's true. She's the best of both worlds.
Mix it all together. And I will say I am a child of the 90s and early 2000s. So every morning before before school, when I was in 7th and 8th grade, I would start with my day with See You Again. And that would give me the strength to have this gay boy walking down the halls of Lincoln Middle School, and just give me the strength to kind of feel my oats and still. So thank you, Miley Cyrus and / Hannah Montana for for consistently giving this gay boy strength in life.
I will say Miley has had quite the journey. She really
Yes.
has.
Truly.
And I think she gets dismissed a lot, and I was one of the people who did for quite some time. She's a Disney star, whatever. But when you actually just look at her voice, just separate the voice from everything else. That is a
Mhm.
great rock and roll voice, and
Yep.
she can really sing. And I didn't know that I needed a new version of Joan Jett, but god damn it, I need a new version of Joan Jett. And Miley Cyrus is that heir apparent to me,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
welcome it.
Yeah,
I'm
I
really
agree with you,
excited.
Eric. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm really excited to watch Miley's career over the next couple of decades. Like, I just think she's going to do really great things. She has already, but I think
Yeah.
it's only going up for her at this point.
No, I
I
agree. I think, Eric, that you were saying that this, she has a lot of growth, and that I think with the Bangers album, like you were saying, it was her. She needed to mature and kind of break free from that Disney mold,
Yep.
and she kind of did that with that era. And then, of course, Miley Cyrus and her Dead's Pets, which we won't even get into. And then. Now she's really broken through that mold and kind of into her own. And I really feel like this is the music that she loves to make, and you can tell because it's so much fun to listen to.
Yeah, I think it's a great album, and I'm glad it was on your list. So thank you for that. Kevin, I want to hear about your fourth pick.
Yeah, so I actually am going to swap because I was going to put this person as my number one pick, but they're going to be my number two pick. So my person that I'm doing is Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. I love these last two picks are easily in my top three of the year. I think my top two album will be talked about in a minute by someone. Punisher is such a fucking great album. It is so, so, so good. And I love what Phoebe Bridgers does. It is, I think I shared this album with you, Eric, like a while ago. And I was like,
You
oh my
did.
God, I love this album. And like, good Lord, the folkiness, I've said that a lot. If you can tell, I really like folk music. I'm just call me a mighty wind. I love what she does in this album because we get this like pop folkiness where you get her. I love Kyoto is like a beautiful song, and it was nominated for best rock song. This is actually the first year where Best Rock Song is at the Grammys is all women. It's
That's
never
a
happened
cool. Yeah,
before.
that's
It's really
Yeah, I
cool.
didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. But I think what Phoebe Bridgers does in this album is this is her like I guess technically second official studio album. She writes music in this like really like super catchy way, but yet she also focuses in on these like deep issues and like really gets you into her music, and you like fully you fully vibe with the work that she's doing. I love that her intro track is called DVD Menu. I'm a huge fan of that. um I think there's if you listen to our hopefully you listen to our Christmas holiday best song. I'm not a huge fan of saxophones either, but I do love a horn and the
Don't we
use of
all?
yeah, the use of horn in Kyoto is so fantastic. And even when she is at her bleakest, there's still an upbeat level that she brings to her music that like she really raises you up, and this album is so coherently done. She's just getting you in this pace where you get to listen to this very beautiful voice to a backdrop of beautiful instruments that level some of the deepest lyrics, deepest tracks that I've heard this entire year. It really takes you on a journey. I guess that's the best way. You really go on a journey with her music, and that's why it's one of my favorite albums of the year.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. We are
I love
going
that
to
journey
turn.
for you.
I
I
love
love
that
that
journey for
journey for
you.
you. Thank you. David.
Andrea, you're going to talk now about your top album of the year. What do you got for us?
My top album of the year is an album called Dream Hunting in the Valley of In Between by a band called Man Man. So huge bias right out the gate. This is like my second favorite band of all time. So it was pretty natural for them to shoot up at the top of my list. But they've been putting out experimental rock albums since the early 2000s. Man Man is the brainchild of a guy named Ryan Katner, or his stage name is Honus Honus. There's a pattern here. And it's the first album that he's put out under the Man Man name in 7 years. And so I lost my mind when I found that out. And I was like super excited to see them tour because I'd never seen them before. And then the world fell apart. But Ryan described his music as controlled chaos. And I think it's the most controlled it's been on this album. It's very chaotic indie rock. And one of my favorite things about this band is they have a very liberal use of the marimba, which I used to play marimba in high school. So I get really excited whenever I hear marimba, like in pop music.
The world could always use more marimba.
Exactly.
It's
and
like
I love
tubas, Andrea. Same thing.
And I love hearing just like the playfulness of a marimba combined with just the chaos of the songs. And it's, when I say chaos, I'm not saying that they're like, you know, insufferable and like hard to listen to. They're not hard to listen to. And I especially think this album is their most accessible album. One of my favorite songs on the album is called Prettiest Song in the World. And it's, spoilers, not the prettiest song in the world, but one of the lines is, I wanted to write you the prettiest song in the world, but I got distracted by wildfires over Burbank. I wanted to write you the prettiest song in the world, but I didn't. And I just, it's just a really good example of the way that Ryan writes lyrics. He's chronically heartbroken. Seems like he's almost always writing about longing and relationships. And, you know, we've all been through breakups and whatever. And he just has a really, really fine talent for being able to put a lot of those feelings into words, especially like the really complicated feelings, which everyone, you know, everyone has their own journey on their breakups and different feelings. But I feel like with him, there's always a song that you can find that someone can relate to. And so I think Dream Hunting is his best album yet. And I think he's even said that he thinks it's his best album yet. And I'm very sad that it's not getting the recognition that it deserves, because it was released during a pandemic and they're not, you know, a huge mainstream band. And I think had it been any other circumstance, this would have been the album to really catapult them.
And who knows what's going to happen next year, right? I mean, it's possible we could have a touring glut. I'm actually very curious to see how all of these backup acts try to get back into the cycle, right? It could be fascinating and it could be a disaster, but let's hope for the better, because what else have we got, right? Thank you for that, Andrea. I had not heard of them, so I appreciate you bringing them to our attention, and we'll have to see if they can get, because I'm assuming it's a touring band more than...
Yeah, it's he's got a handful of albums out there, like 4 or 5, I think. But they're definitely one of those bands that, you know, they're easy to fall in love with through their records. But you become obsessed after you see them live.
Sure.
Because it's always a rotating cast of musicians, and you know, they're insane on stage. And if you really love the experience of going to a concert, especially more of like a show versus like an arena show, and I'm talking like, you know, mid-size venues to smaller venues, they're just the perfect band for that environment.
Great.
My mom actually said to me today, she's like, "Oh my God, I can't wait for you to come see Lady Gaga with us at the stadium next year." And I was like, "Girl, that ain't gonna happen."
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
Okay. I was like, okay, sure.
But,
meanwhile, 4 people tested positive for COVID in her office. Congratulations, upstate New York.
Yeah, seriously.
It's okay. We'll have the Dolly Parton vaccine soon.
Soon.
Mm-hmm.
Not soon enough.
Vaccine.
That's it right there.
Dolly.
Yeah, all praise to
What
Dolly.
can she do?
Exactly. So I'm going to move on to my personal top pick of the year, and I think it's for several other people. That would be Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa. Now, I
Yes.
distinctly remember reading advanced reviews of this album. It came out in late March, and so I feel like I was reading reviews of it in mid-March, which is right when everything was going to absolute shit, right?
Yep.
So I remember these reviews saying like, this is the album of the year. This is the album that's going to be changing the sound of pop music. And at the time I was like, calm down. Like it was literal eye rolls for me. I'm like, stop it. Like it's March, the world is on fire, and you were here telling me that this album is going to change music, right? And then I listened to the album, and goddamn it, they were completely right. In my opinion, this 9 months later, Future Nostalgia is still unquestionably the best album of the year. And I really do think that it's going to be, and I hope, ushering in a new sound for pop music in general. And obviously I'm using the term new very generally here because this album is not really doing anything hugely different. As the title of it suggests, there is a throwback element, but it's a callback to the time when pop music was upbeat. It had unbridled energy, and it was totally unironic. It was just pop music. And sign me up for that because I feel like for the past decade, I have been waiting for pop music to give me a pulse again. It's been a lot
Yep.
of this very mid-tempo, deliberately off key. Everybody's acting like they're over it. And listen, like if that's your thing, go for it. But I need strutting that ass music. I need it to survive. And that's what Future Nostalgia gives me. You've
Yep.
got the title track, you've got Don't Start Now, you've got Levitating, you've got Hallucinate, you've got Good in Bed, tens across the
Physical.
board. Physical. Like every song on this album is just Dua Lipa giving it to you fully present. This is a pop star that I've been missing for a really long time. And I welcome our new pop overlord. I'm very excited by this. And I was not a huge Dua Lipa fan before. Like I liked some of her songs, but I would see like these tens of millions of views of her songs on YouTube, and I'm like, really? I'm 100% on board now. So thank you, Dua Lipa, for giving me the album literally this album got me through 2020, and I'm so grateful for it. So
It's so good. It is every homosexual. I mean, when you look at Spotify Unwrapped and you look at like, I'm sorry, I'll say the stereotypical gays.
Sure.
She is on everyone's top artist list. You will see, I mean, my top song of the year was Physical. Physical is so fun. It's so fun. And you know what's even fun? I will say this, what's even funnier about her, she really can't dance. She really can't. And
she's gotten better. I think some of her performances at the EMAs for Don't Start Now, I mean, compared to where she was maybe on her first album, she's not the best dancer. She's not like Beyonce, but she's gotten a little better.
I will say there is a huge disconnect between her album and her star power as a live performer. That's okay.
Yes, totally.
I'm going to give her time to grow into that because the recording and whether it's her, the producer, whatever, it's working. And Britney Spears has made a 3-decade career off of being a highly produced pop product, and she is renowned as an icon. I'm not saying that Dua Lipa's there yet. I'm saying she has the ingredients to be there. And
Sure
I need
does.
that right now. I need that energy, and she's giving it to me more than anybody else.
Ariana Grande, take notes.
Ariana Grande, I'm not knocking her, although I will say Decisions would have been is up there.
Positions.
That's what I mean. Positions up there with my disappointments of 2020.
Positions, same thing.
Choices.
I would agree, but Ariana Grande is amazing.
She is.
Oh no, she is. I love her.
But she did not give me Future Nostalgia this year, did she? She gave me nostalgia for Break Free. That's what she gave me nostalgia for. Jake, go ahead and take it with your top album of the year.
Sure. So I think this kind of is a good segue from your last point, Eric, with Future Nostalgia, is that the kind of music that I think you and I both love is that fun, pure bubblegum pop music that's well produced, that has production. And I'm here for that. And I think we both are. And Kevin, I think That's why my album of the year goes to Chromatica by Lady Gaga. Now, I know it's a little cliche and it's very, hyper pop, as the kids say. And I will admit, I am a little monster.
Mhm.
The last concert that I saw live before, the world started to end was I saw her jazz and piano show in Vegas,
Mm,
Ooh,
which
nice.
was
Very
amazing.
I
nice.
bet.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if she was going to go on. She was sick the night before, but she miraculously recovered and brought down the house and did all of her cheek to cheek numbers.
Mm.
And that's part of why I love her is how versatile she is, and I'm really jealous of that because again, that's something I'm not. And she can go from doing jazz cheek to cheek. She can go to doing a Metallica number to doing Poker Face to Shallow with A Star Is Born. Her versatility and her artistry in many mediums is just so is just I feel just so amazing, and I think it's well deserved. But this album specifically made me cry. And not because there were any ballads on it that were sad, but it's because the album, as a little monster, the one that I had been waiting for, um, because we first got to know Lady Gaga in the late 2000s with Just Dance. That was her big first single, and then she had another one-two punch with Poker Face, and that's the music that I fell in love with her. I remember listening to that on the bus. Yes, I am a millennial, so on the school bus, I was listening to Lady Gaga on my
God
iPod.
bless. God bless.
Bless my heart, yeah, thinking that I was the shit. And then, listening to, disco sticks before I had algebra. Um, and then I fell in love with her with that music. And then between then, she had some great, some people didn't love art pop. I happen to like it. And then, and Born
Justice
This
for
Way,
our pop.
Justice for
for our
Art
pop.
Pop.
It is
exactly.
I actually,
unfairly criticized.
I actually think it's her best album. To
I think
be
it's
honest
really
with you.
good.
I think it's her best album.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and I think that at the time it was people didn't appreciate that. People obviously called it art flop, but it had some great hits on there. From Gypsy is such a lovely song. The composition on that is beautiful. Mary Jane Holland, I think, with the exception of "Do What You Want" with R. Kelly, just for obvious reasons. But then she
Yeah.
did a mix with Christina Aguilera, to kind of make it all right again. But I love this album. It made me cry because it was the album that I had been waiting for, with this return to dance music. Her first single from this was Stupid Love, which was such a fun song. And then Rain on Me, which was probably my most listened to song of the year, with
Great song.
Ariana Grande, is such an upbeat pop anthem that I can just, dance around in my house or go for, work out at the gym or something. It just gives me so much life. And just hearing Ariana's whistle note at the end is everything. And it's just such an amazing song between two queens, and it's nominated for, I think, Pop Duo of the Year at the Grammys. This album is also nominated for Best Pop Vocal Album. So I'm excited to see how that does. It's, also nominated against Future Nostalgia, which I think probably will win deservingly. Another part of why I love this album is just the rollout of it was, her merchandising was amazing, and we stand a merch queen between the Chromatica jock straps.
Did you actually get yours? Because a lot of people still haven't.
I got mine, but it took three
He's
times as
wearing
long.
it right now.
I'm wearing it right now. It's just what I wear to CVS. I wear it to everywhere I go. Just to the grocery store. Just that and a mask, and nothing matters anymore.
Casual daytime look. Absolutely. There are no rules. It's 2020.
Exactly. Look over there. It's me. And now with her release of the Chromatic Oreos that are coming out in January, you best believe I tried to. So they were going to send free Chromatic Oreos for the first 2,000 people on the email list. I tried. I unfortunately did not get any. So I'm still mourning that loss. But I will be getting them when they do come out at Stop and Shop. I will be first in line, as if I needed another reason to buy a cookie and eat one.
Amen. Amen. But thank you to Gaga for wrapping up our year with Another Way to Get Fatter. So a great album, and Diabetes. What a year. What a year for Gaga, right? So thank you, Jake. That was excellent. Anything else to add on Chromatica?
No, I just think, people were saying that this is her comeback to dance. Yeah, it's her comeback to dance, but didn't really have to come back to anything because she's never really gone away. She's had such an amazing 3 years between the Super Bowl, her winning the Oscar with Shallow, and which was the most awarded song of all time. To her documentary on Netflix, she's just had such a huge few years, and as a Lady Gaga Little Monster fan, it's just been really gratifying to see.
And we love to see it. So, Kevin, bring us home with your top album of the year. What do you got?
Yep, I'm so excited. So I changed this actually recently. Sorry about that, Eric. Because it was originally Phoebe Bridgers, but it really is officially Rina Sawayama's album Sawayama. It is pop excellence. And when I say it is pop excellence, I mean it scratches every itch. It is Korn and Limp Bizkit meets Britney and Christina. Like you will listen to a song, you'll be like, oh my God, am I listening to a Korn song?
Yeah.
I in 1999 and am I a freak on a leash? And then the next song is like Pup Princess Realness or Avril Lavigne. Like I love what this album does. It is clearly an homage to like the TRL late 90s, early 2000s music. Like I don't even want to say pop music because in what TRL did was it allowed us to engage in this discourse around all this different types of music, and you'll actually hear some R&B too. I was actually right before this, there was a song that I was listening to on her album where it was like, this is straight up like late 90s R&B realness, and I love this. What she does on this album is transcendent. And I think it allows you to experience stuff that you're just like, oh my God, she is an artist on the rise. I was listening to an interview with her actually this past week on a podcast, and she's such a geek and she's such a musical genius that you just fucking fall in love with her as a person. She was talking about, I think she went to Cambridge because she's British. I think she went to Cambridge, and she's like, I was bullied in college. I was at college and I was talking about how I wanted to be a musician, and they were making fun of me, and like this just wasn't the tea, and they didn't think that I was a serious student or serious enough. And like what she does with music is utterly brilliant in this album. And I don't want to slam Pitchfork. I've talked about Pitchfork a lot. They're kind of the like, they want to be the reviewer of choice for music, but they fucking hate pop music. They hate pop music so much, and it blows my mind. This album is like a 7.7 for them. Like, and I'm gonna say this right now, fuck Pitchfork. Like seriously, this album is a 10. It is so perfect, and it is it is the album that really got me through a lot of quarantine, and I reevaluated what I needed from quarantine, and this album is it. And it's it because it gives you everything. It gives you Korn, it gives you Limp Bizkit, it gives you Avril Lavigne, it gives you Christina, it gives you Britney. It is, and even like it just gives you what you need, and you are at her leisure or pleasure because she knows how to create some of the most diverse arrangements of music. And in the interview that I was listening to, she talked about how she'd hear a song and she'd be like, yeah, that's not what I want it to sound like. And the arrangers would be like, oh, well, we need you to do this. And she's like, yeah, that's not what it's going to be. It's going to be more, it's going to be Avril Lavigne. It's not going to be this. And I want it to be this. And she knows what she's doing. She's so smart. There is an intellect about her she is a student of music, and she knows how to bring the best to us.
And
And
that's what really
I'm
that's
so
what struck me
excited.
about the album, Kevin. Yeah, was that this is someone who clearly knows music and is a music fan. And she's a
Yes.
fan of a particular time period that you referenced there. And this is her saying, these are all the things I love, and I'm going to put my spin on them. And
Yep.
so you have someone who's an astute student of the art form, then kind of taking it and putting it through the filter of her own talent. And it's a wild disc. Like, there were
Oh,
times
it's
where I'm like,
insane.
I'm listening to it, I was like, did I go to another album? Am I still on the same album? What's happening right now? And I'm like, no, this is still the same thing. But it's so interesting to me. It's really I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but I'm saying this. It's big dick energy in
Yep.
a female album.
Yep.
And I appreciate that because what you were saying about her, like, really itemizing how she wanted things to sound, I fully buy that based on what I heard. So
Yep.
my hope is that this is really the thing that kind of, she's been around for, this is not her first album,
I think it's her
right?
first studio album.
Okay.
I think it's her
Um,
first studio album. But like even the way she starts this with Dynasty, it's just
yeah.
like, oh my god, hearing just like her hype, like I don't want to say high pitched because that sounds wrong because I'm but hearing the way she sings Dynasty, I'm just like, oh my god, yes. She's really, 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 really fantastic. I adore her, and she released a new single recently
Yeah.
that what is it called? It's gonna bother me. It's called Lucid. It's called Lucid.
Yes.
It's so good. I mean, she's excellence.
She is, and I'm hoping that this will be really her breakthrough,
Me too.
because I think she's definitely deserving of more attention. So, with that, we are running long again. I'm sorry if you're listening to
What?
these 2020 best ofs. I apologize, but we did get through all of them, and so I want to say that those are our picks. Did you listen to any of them? Do you have opinions? Is there something else that we missed? This episode is really just the beginning of the discussion. So let us know your favorites on social media and at greatpopculturedebate.com. And please make sure to come back to our website right in the beginning of 2021 because we have got the polls hitting the deck for season 3. They're going to open right in the first week of the new year. We're talking best movie musical, best one-hit wonder, best Ben and Jerry's flavor, and best Muppet, just to name a few. And we want your votes because you actually have a say in what we discuss. So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Audible, and make sure that you're following us on all of our social media accounts for all the latest news. And if you have not yet supported us on Patreon and Pod Hero yet, please do so. There are so many great perks, and we would love to have you as part of our little pod family. So thank you to my panel. I appreciate all of your thoughts and your picks, and thank you for listening this year. And let's look forward to an even better and brighter 2021.